Have you ever had that moment where someone's words cut through you like a knife, and yet you don't have the strength or courage to speak up? Picture this. You're sitting in a cab, minding your own business, when suddenly the person next to you starts berating the driver for something that's not even his fault. It's uncomfortable, isn't it? But what if I told you this wasn't just any ordinary taxi ride? What if I told you the consequences of those words would spiral out of control in a way that no one saw coming? That's the exact story we're about to dive into today. A story that will leave you questioning how far a single moment of rudeness can really go. But here's the catch. You might not see the true power of this story until the very end. Stick with me, because by the time we're done, you'll have witnessed a powerful turn of events that will make you rethink everything you've ever known about judgment, kindness, and what happens when someone crosses a line. This is more than just a taxi ride. It's a lesson in humanity, a reminder that we never know who's truly listening. You're going to want to see how it all unfolds. I promise, you won't want to miss the moment when everything changes. Now, imagine this scenario. A taxi ride in the middle of a busy city, the kind of ride we all take for granted. The sun is low in the sky, casting long shadows across the streets, and the hum of the city pulses around you. Inside the cab, there's a tension that's barely noticeable at first, a flicker of discomfort as the passenger in the back seat begins to speak. The driver, a middle-aged man with worn hands and a gentle smile, is doing his best to navigate the crowded streets. But then it happens. The passenger, perhaps frustrated by the slow-moving traffic, mutters something under his breath. It's something about the driver's English, the way he speaks, the way he carries himself. It's a subtle jab at his accent, his ability to communicate. And in that moment, you can feel the sting of it. It's clear that the passenger has no idea who he's dealing with. But what the rude passenger doesn't realize, what nobody in that cab realizes, is that this moment of harsh words is about to set off a chain of events that no one saw coming. Because it's not just the driver who's listening. Someone else in that taxi, someone sitting quietly in the front seat, has been absorbing every word. And in an instant, the dynamic in that cab shifts. The story that starts with an insult ends in a revelation that no one could have anticipated. This is a moment when the universe steps in, showing that actions, even the smallest ones, don't go unnoticed. But who is listening, and what are they going to do about it? Well, that's the part of the story you'll have to wait to discover. I know what you're probably thinking. What happens next? Who's going to take action? The tension in the cab builds, and you can feel the weight of the words hanging in the air, almost like a storm cloud waiting to burst. The passenger's words sting, but is the driver going to respond? Or will he keep his calm, as he has done countless times before? It's a difficult choice to make when you're the one being insulted, especially when you're doing your best just to make a living. But the real question here isn't whether the driver will stand up for himself. It's what happens when this one act of cruelty gets under the skin of someone who refuses to be silent. And that's where the real magic of this story happens. What the passenger doesn't know is that there's someone else who is watching the situation unfold with sharp eyes, someone who will change the course of the moment in ways the passenger could never have predicted. This isn't just a story about rudeness or miscommunication. It's a tale of consequences and the incredible power of standing up for what's right when no one else will. The events that follow might make you rethink everything you've ever known about respect, dignity, and the unexpected ways that kindness can be a force stronger than anger. But here's where things get interesting. The driver doesn't react the way you might expect. He stays calm, keeps his focus on the road, and chooses not to engage. It's the kind of grace that feels almost too rare these days. You might be sitting there, thinking to yourself, why doesn't he say something? Why doesn't he defend himself? But the truth is, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to remain silent and let the actions of others speak louder than words ever could. The passenger, on the other hand, is still oblivious to the storm he's set in motion. As the ride continues, the tension only grows, and you can feel that something is about to break. Now, I know you're hooked. You're wondering, what happens when the taxi pulls over? Who's going to step in? What will the consequences be for this passenger who thought it was okay to belittle someone else? The driver, the passenger, and the secret listener, they're all heading toward a moment of truth. The passenger's words have sparked a fire, but what happens when the flames reach the people who are truly paying attention? This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because what's about to happen next is not only going to change the passenger's life, but it's also going to make you rethink how you see the world around you. Trust me, this is a twist you don't want to miss. By the time we reach the final act, you'll be on the edge of your seat, questioning everything you thought you knew about fairness, justice, and the consequences of our actions. Stick with me, because in the end, this story will leave you speechless, and maybe even inspired to change the way you approach the world. So, buckle up, because the story of how a rude passenger insulted a taxi driver's English is about to unfold in a way you won't believe. Just remember, the truth isn't always what it seems, and sometimes the quietest voices have the most to say. The taxi driver, a man named Rami, had always been the picture of patience. If you'd asked anyone who knew him, they'd tell you that he was the type of person who could handle the worst of customers with a calm smile and a steady hand. He'd been driving cabs for nearly 15 years, ever since he moved to the United States from the Middle East, a place he no longer called home, but still carried with him in his heart. Life had been anything but easy for Rami, but he made it work. Every day, he woke up at dawn, greeted by the same worn-out but comforting routine. He would have a quick breakfast of toast and tea, check his phone for any messages or calls, and then make his way to the garage where his taxi awaited him. It was a modest job, one that didn't offer much in terms of glamour or excitement, but it kept the bills paid and food on the table. And in his line of work, that was enough. But Rami wasn't just a taxi driver. He was a man with a story, one that he didn't often share with anyone. He'd spent years perfecting his English, learning the language not only out of necessity, but also out of a desire to connect with the people around him. He'd put in hours at language classes, practiced with fellow immigrants, and even recorded his voice on a tape recorder to work on his pronunciation. He wasn't fluent in the way that a native speaker might be, but his English was clear enough to communicate, and that was all that mattered. At least, that's what he told himself. But deep down, there was a part of him that always felt like he wasn't truly seen. Like the subtle accents and slight missteps in his words marked him as different, as an outsider. And that's exactly what had led him to this moment. He'd been driving for over an hour on that particular shift, picking up passengers from all walks of life. Some were friendly and eager to chat, others were silent, lost in their phones or minds. But this particular ride was different. The passenger in the back seat had climbed into the cab with an air of arrogance, barely acknowledging Rami as he slid into the seat. He was a tall man, sharply dressed in a way that screamed privilege, his face set in a perpetual scowl. His name, Rami later found out, was Greg, a corporate lawyer who had just finished a high-powered meeting in the city and was on his way to an upscale hotel. He wasn't the sort of person Rami usually interacted with, but that didn't matter. Everyone needed a ride, and Rami had learned long ago not to judge his passengers. However, as soon as Greg began speaking, it became clear that the mood in the cab was about to change. Greg had begun with a dismissive comment about the traffic, and then, out of nowhere, he made a remark about Rami's accent. It wasn't loud or overtly aggressive, but it was enough to sting. It was the kind of thing you might expect from someone who believed their own education and status elevated them above others. The words themselves weren't harsh, but the tone, the condescension, the thinly veiled ridicule, it was all there. "Your English could use some work, don't you think?" Greg had said, his eyes never meeting Rami's in the rearview mirror. It was a small, almost offhand remark, but for Rami, it felt like a punch to the gut. And in that moment, he could have easily retorted, could have snapped back with a biting comment of his own. But he didn't. Rami had spent years learning to bite his tongue, to let slights like this pass by him without stirring the waters. He'd done it for his own peace of mind, for the sake of his job, for the sake of his family. What Greg didn't know, though, was that this time something else was at play, something that no one could have predicted. As Rami continued to drive, focusing on the road and trying to push the insult to the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, not just by the silent passenger, but by something larger. And in that moment, Rami's mind began to wander. He thought about the days when he first arrived in the United States, a young man with nothing but a dream and a suitcase full of hope. He'd worked his way up from the bottom, taking on job after job, slowly building his life from the ground up. But even after all those years, he still felt like an outsider, always just one step away from truly fitting in. The constant reminder that his accent made him different, that his English wasn't perfect, had been a silent, nagging force in his life, but it wasn't something he often allowed to control him. Yet here he was, in a cab with a man who made it clear in a single sentence that Rami would never be fully accepted, not in the way that people like Greg were. But as the ride wore on, something began to change. Rami's mind drifted back to the words that Greg had spoken, but his thoughts were interrupted by a soft sound from the front passenger seat. It was a small noise, almost imperceptible, but Rami's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't explain it, but something about that sound seemed different. He glanced quickly in the rearview mirror, expecting to see a random passenger lost in thought, but instead, his eyes locked with someone else in the car. A woman, sitting quietly in the front seat. She had been there the entire time, unnoticed by Greg, and yet there she was, her face calm and unreadable. This woman, a stranger to both Rami and Greg, had heard every word of the conversation. She was watching, her expression impossible to read, as if she knew something that neither Rami nor Greg could understand. Rami had no idea who she was or how long she had been in the car, but something about her presence made the air feel heavier, charged with an unspoken tension. It was as though the quiet, unassuming woman held the key to something much larger, something that Rami couldn't yet comprehend. What was she doing here? Why was she so quiet, so composed? And why did it feel like the moment in the cab had shifted in a way that no one, not even Rami, had expected? As the ride continued, the questions kept piling up, the uncertainty growing. Rami's thoughts were racing, but so were yours. Who was this woman, and why did she seem to be so aware of the situation? Was she just an innocent bystander, or was she connected to the events unfolding in ways that no one could predict? What was going to happen when the ride ended? Was Greg's careless insult going to have consequences, or would it fade away like so many others before it? And what did this mysterious woman know that no one else seemed to understand? You're sitting on the edge of your seat, just as Rami is, and you're beginning to wonder if the true story here has yet to unfold. There's more to this moment than meets the eye, and the clock is ticking, each second pulling you closer to a revelation that will answer all the questions you've been asking. But hold on tight, because the next part of the story is where everything starts to unravel. Just remember, things are never quite as simple as they seem. The cab ride seemed to stretch on forever. As Rami navigated through the winding streets of the city, the silence between him and the mysterious woman in the front seat was thick enough to cut with a knife. He tried to focus on the road, but his mind kept drifting back to the strange feeling that something was happening, something just beyond his understanding. He couldn't shake the sensation that everything in this moment was unfolding according to some unseen plan. The words from the passenger, Greg, still echoed in his ears, and now, with this quiet woman sitting in the front, he was certain there was more to this than just an insult. Something didn't add up. He glanced in the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of her face. There was an air of calm about her, but also something else, something unsettling. It wasn't just that she'd heard everything, or that she was so composed when the tension in the cab was palpable. There was a weight to her silence, like she was waiting for something. But waiting for what? Rami couldn't figure it out, and the more he thought about it, the more unnerved he became. The woman wasn't acting like a typical passenger. She didn't seem to be bothered by the awkwardness in the cab, nor did she seem concerned by Greg's words. Instead, she had the appearance of someone who knew something was coming, something that neither Rami nor Greg could predict. But before he could dwell on it for too long, things began to take a turn. The city was just beginning to shift from the chaos of rush hour to a quieter evening, but the stillness didn't last long. Out of nowhere, Rami's phone buzzed with an alert, one that made his stomach drop. It was a notification for a new message, but it wasn't from anyone he knew. It was an anonymous text. The message was brief. Stop digging. It's not worth it. Rami's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing. He stared at the screen, his hand trembling slightly. He hadn't been investigating anything, at least not consciously. But somehow, this message made him feel like he was walking down a path he wasn't meant to go down. Like someone knew he was starting to piece together something that he wasn't supposed to understand. But who could have sent it?
And why?
He glanced over at the woman in the front seat, her face still unreadable, as though she hadn't noticed anything. He had half a mind to ask her if she'd seen or heard anything strange, but just as the thought crossed his mind, the situation became even more complicated. The woman's phone buzzed, the same eerie hum of an incoming message, and for just a brief moment, their eyes met in the rearview mirror. Something unspoken passed between them, something Rami couldn't decipher, but it left him feeling more on edge than ever. His heart raced, and the feeling of being watched crept back. He quickly turned his attention back to the road, trying to suppress the growing sense of paranoia. The cab ride seemed endless, and yet, when they finally reached Greg's hotel, Rami's unease had only deepened. The woman in the front seat was the first to move. She opened the door slowly, almost deliberately, as if she were preparing for something or someone. Greg, oblivious to everything that had happened, handed Rami a tip and stepped out of the cab with a huff, muttering something under his breath about the disrespectful city. Rami didn't respond. Instead, his eyes were fixed on the woman in the front seat, still calm and composed, as if she had just witnessed something completely different from what he had experienced. But just as Rami opened his mouth to speak, to ask her who she was or what was going on, something unexpected happened. She looked over at him, her eyes locking with his, and in that moment, everything shifted. She smiled, but it wasn't a smile of reassurance. It was a smile of recognition, as though she knew something Rami didn't, something he hadn't yet uncovered. She pulled out a small envelope from her bag, the kind of envelope that looked old, worn, as though it had been handled more times than Rami could count. She handed it to him without a word, her eyes never leaving his face. Rami took the envelope, his curiosity piqued, but as he did, he noticed something strange. There was a faint smell on the paper, a scent that immediately triggered a memory from his past. It was a scent he hadn't thought about in years, the distinct smell of ink and paper, mixed with the faintest trace of something metallic. It was the same scent he'd encountered once before, back when he was still a teenager, back when he was still trying to escape the shadows of his past. A past that, for all these years, he had desperately tried to forget. Before he could react, the woman was already out of the cab, walking away into the fading evening light, disappearing into the crowd. Rami was left standing there, holding the envelope in his hands, completely unsure of what to do next. His mind raced, but the more he thought about it, the more confused he became. He didn't want to open the envelope, not right there, not in the middle of the street. But he couldn't help himself. His fingers shook as he carefully tore open the flap, and inside, he found a single photograph, an old one, yellowing with age. The image was blurry, but unmistakable. It was of a younger Rami, standing in front of a house that looked all too familiar, the house he had grown up in, the house he had left behind when he fled his home country all those years ago. And standing next to him in the photograph was someone he hadn't thought about in years, a man he had tried to forget, the very man who had once betrayed him in the most unimaginable way. Rami's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the photo, the memories flooding back in an instant. It was the man who had once been his closest friend, a man he had trusted with everything. But that trust had been shattered when that very friend had turned on him, pulling Rami into a mess of lies and deceit. And now, here he was again, his face hidden in the shadows of an old photograph, his betrayal lingering like a dark cloud over Rami's entire life. What was the connection between this photograph, the woman in the front seat, and the cryptic message warning him to stop digging? Rami had no answers, only more questions. And as the weight of the envelope seemed to grow heavier in his hands, he realized something far more unsettling. The answers he was searching for might not be as simple as he had hoped. The deeper he went, the more tangled this web became. And the stakes? They were higher than he could have ever imagined. Just as Rami turned the envelope over, something shifted in the distance. A shadow loomed, someone walking toward him, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Was it another warning? Or had someone finally come to collect the truth? As Rami stood frozen in the street, staring at the photograph, the shadow looming closer became more distinct. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, walking with purpose, his eyes fixed firmly on Rami. There was something in his gait that was both calm and menacing, like someone who knew exactly where they were going and had no intention of being stopped. Rami's grip tightened around the envelope, his mind racing.
Who was this man?
Was he another player in the twisted web that was rapidly unraveling around him, or was he simply another reminder of the dangers of the past? His heart pounded in his chest as the man closed the distance, but before Rami could react, a sudden text buzzed through his phone again. This time, it wasn't just a warning. It was a name. Samir. Rami's pulse quickened. Samir. That name was another ghost from his past, one he had hoped to bury forever. It was the name of a man he had once called a brother, the one who had been his closest ally back in their home country before betrayal shattered everything. The same man who had been involved in the shady deals that had ultimately forced Rami to flee to the United States all those years ago. Rami's hands shook as he stared at the message. Who could have sent it? Why now? Was this part of the same conspiracy that had been slowly pulling him into its grasp? Or was it something far more personal, something that had been brewing beneath the surface for far longer than he had realized? But just as Rami was about to make sense of the text, his phone rang, the screen flashing with a name he hadn't expected to see in years. His younger sister, Layla. She had been his only family left when he left everything behind to escape the chaos of his past. After everything that had happened, they had lost touch. The last time they spoke, it was over a decade ago when he left without a word, trying to protect her from the web of lies and danger that had consumed his life. Now, it seemed as though fate had brought them back into each other's orbit, but under circumstances that made Rami's heart skip a beat. He answered the phone with trembling hands. Rami. Her voice was shaky, strained. She sounded different, older, but still unmistakably his sister. I don't know how to say this, but I think someone's been following me. The words hit Rami like a punch to the gut. Following her? What did she mean? Layla had always been strong, resourceful. She had built her own life, far away from the dangers that haunted Rami's past. And yet, here she was, on the other end of the line, sounding terrified. His mind raced, images of his past life flashing before him. Had the same people who were targeting him now set their sights on her? Was this all connected? What do you mean, Layla? Who's following you? Rami demanded, his voice tight with urgency. She hesitated, her breath catching in her throat before she finally spoke again. I don't know exactly, but there's been a man. I don't think he's just a coincidence. And yesterday, I found something. Something that doesn't make sense. Rami's heart skipped a beat. What had she found? What was she talking about? Layla was usually the one who kept her head down, stayed out of trouble. If she had found something, it meant the pieces of this puzzle were scattered far and wide, and someone was actively trying to keep it all hidden. What did you find, Layla? He pressed, now fully gripped by the fear that had begun to cloud his thoughts. I found a picture, she said softly, and Rami could hear her voice trembling. It's of you. From when we were kids. But it's not just a family photo. There's someone else in it, someone I don't recognize, standing right next to you. I don't know what it means, but it doesn't feel right. The blood drained from Rami's face. A picture of him, a hidden figure beside him. Who is it? Was it someone from his past? Someone who was involved in the betrayal that had torn his world apart? And how had Layla come across it? There were too many questions, and none of them had answers. His grip on the phone tightened as his mind spun in 1,000 directions at once. Layla, you need to be careful. Don't trust anyone right now, not even. But before Rami could finish, the line went dead. He stared at the phone, the silence on the other end a chilling reminder of how deep this mystery was becoming. Something was happening, something far larger than he could understand. And now it seemed like it was closing in on the people he loved. Without thinking, Rami slammed the phone back into his pocket and turned to face the man who had been walking toward him. The stranger was now only a few feet away, his eyes locked on Rami's with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. The man didn't say a word at first, but his presence was enough to make Rami's blood run cold. Who was he? What did he want? But before Rami could ask, the man's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. I think you've been looking for answers in all the wrong places, he said in a low, gravelly voice. Maybe it's time you stop digging. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll find something you wish you hadn't. The words hit Rami like a bolt of lightning, and for a moment, he was paralyzed with confusion. What was the man talking about? Why did it feel like he knew more about Rami's past than Rami did himself? He was about to say something, demand more answers, but suddenly, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the night as quickly as he had appeared. Rami stood there, rooted to the spot, his mind racing, his heart pounding. Everything had just shifted. Layla, the photograph, the text, the mysterious woman in the cab, none of it made sense anymore. Was someone orchestrating all of this? Was there a force working behind the scenes to push Rami into a corner, forcing him to confront a past he had spent years trying to escape? And what did Layla's discovery mean? Who was that figure in the picture, and why had they been hidden all these years? The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but they weren't fitting the way Rami expected. There was something much darker at play, something that was far from over. And as the mystery deepened, so did the danger. Rami had no idea who to trust anymore, but one thing was certain. This wasn't just about him anymore. The stakes were higher than ever, and the truth, whatever it was, could cost him everything. As the night stretched on, Rami's only thought was how far he was willing to go to uncover the truth. Would he risk everything, including the safety of the people he cared about, to finally put the past to rest? Or would the darkness that had been following him all these years be too much to overcome? Only time would tell. The night was heavier than Rami had ever remembered. The streets, once familiar and comforting, now felt like they were closing in around him, suffocating him with their darkness. He had barely managed to process the strange encounter with the man, the eerie message about his sister, and the photograph that had surfaced from a life he thought he had left behind. But as he walked away from the alley, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't make sense of, he couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen, something he couldn't control, something beyond his understanding. He decided to head back to his apartment, thinking that maybe, just maybe, the solace of his own space could help him gather his thoughts. But the moment he stepped through the door, a wave of unease hit him. The air inside his apartment felt thick, heavy, as if it too was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. His eyes darted around the room, but everything seemed as it should be. The pictures on the walls, the books on the shelf, the same old clutter, it all appeared normal. But the more he stood there, the more the quiet seemed to whisper at the edges of his mind. Something wasn't right. Something had changed. He froze mid-step when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. His front door, which he had locked before leaving, was now slightly ajar. The latch wasn't fully engaged, and it was as if someone had come in and left without a trace. His pulse quickened as panic began to settle in, but he couldn't bring himself to move. Every instinct told him to bolt, to run out of the apartment and never look back, but his legs felt like they were frozen in place, weighed down by the looming dread that wrapped around him like a thick fog. Taking a slow, steady breath, he moved toward the door, his hand trembling as he pushed it open. The hallway beyond seemed empty, devoid of life, but that only made the situation worse. He felt exposed, vulnerable, as if someone was watching him from the shadows, waiting for him to make a move. He stepped back inside, quickly locking the door behind him once more. But just as he turned to head to his bedroom to try and gather his bearings, his phone buzzed in his pocket again, a harsh, intrusive sound that made his heart skip. It was another message, but this one was different. This one was from Layla. Rami, something's wrong. I don't know how to explain this, but I think they're coming for me. I saw the same man from before. He was standing across the street. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. The text shattered Rami's thoughts, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. Layla had never sounded like this, not even during the hardest times they'd faced together. Her words felt like a scream through the silence, a desperate cry for help that Rami couldn't ignore. Every part of him screamed at him to reach out, to call her and make sure she was safe, but something deep inside him knew that it was already too late. Whoever was after them was already too close. They were already in the middle of it. Rami quickly dialed Layla's number, but it went straight to voicemail. He tried again and again, but nothing changed. A wave of panic surged through him, followed by an overwhelming sense of helplessness. This wasn't just about him anymore. Layla, his only remaining family, was in danger, and he couldn't even get a hold of her. Was she already gone? Was she somewhere out there, unable to escape whatever had been closing in on him for so long? His mind raced, but he couldn't think clearly. The walls felt like they were caving in around him, and with every unanswered ring, the paranoia intensified. The messages, the threats, the shadowy figures, it was all coming together, and it wasn't a coincidence. Someone was orchestrating all of this. But who? And why? What was the connection between the strange man, the cryptic photographs, and the whispers of betrayal that Rami had buried in the past? And now Layla's fear. Was it his fault? Had they been targeted because of him? He took a deep breath and tried to steady himself, forcing himself to think. Maybe there was something he was missing, a piece of the puzzle he hadn't seen yet. He had to find out who was pulling the strings, and he had to do it quickly. The very thought of losing Layla sent a chill down his spine, and his fear morphed into something much darker, something desperate. He couldn't let whatever this was tear apart everything he had left. Suddenly, his phone buzzed again and Rami's stomach twisted. It wasn't Layla this time. The message came from an unknown number, its content short but sharp. "You're too close, Rami. If you care about your sister, you'll stop now. This is your last warning." The finality of those words hit him like a punch to the gut. He stared at the message, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Was this the same people who had been watching him, the ones who had been waiting for him to stumble into this? Had they already found Layla? Or was the warning just a game, a tactic to keep him from digging any deeper? He didn't know, and that uncertainty ate away at him from the inside. Rami's thoughts spiraled into chaos. Who could he trust? Everyone he had ever relied on was either gone or compromised. His family was in danger, and every move he made felt like it could be his last. The more he tried to piece things together, the more the mystery slipped through his fingers, like sand in an hourglass. But then, as he looked around the room, a horrible realization settled in his chest. Something was off. It wasn't just the phone calls, the cryptic messages, or the man in the alley. The entire apartment felt wrong in a way he couldn't describe. It was as if everything had been manipulated, carefully staged to make him feel cornered, out of options. And the thought that gnawed at him, that tugged at the edge of his mind, was that he might have been part of the game all along. What if someone close to him had been playing him from the very beginning? What if the key to everything, to the missing pieces, to the shadows that had followed him, was someone he thought he could trust? A knock at the door startled him from his thoughts, and his heart leaped into his throat. He froze, unsure of whether he should answer or run. But before he could decide, the knocking came again, more insistent this time. He slowly made his way to the door, every step heavy with dread. His mind screamed for him to turn away, but he knew he couldn't ignore it anymore. As he reached for the doorknob, everything seemed to freeze, the world holding its breath, just as he had. And then, with a sudden rush of cold air, the door swung open, revealing nothing but the darkness of the hallway. But the terror didn't stop there. In the very next moment, his phone buzzed again, another message. This one made Rami's blood run cold. "You should have stayed away. Layla's gone." The weight of those words slammed into him, leaving him breathless, paralyzed in a way he had never experienced before. Rami stood frozen, the words on his phone blurring in front of his eyes. "Layla's gone." He felt his heart stop, the blood draining from his face, his mind refusing to process what he was reading. Layla, his only remaining family, The person he'd been desperate to protect had vanished. Was she taken? Was she hurt? The terror of the unknown was suffocating. His breath came in jagged gasps as panic gripped him, and the uncertainty of what to do next made him feel paralyzed. He couldn't think straight, couldn't even comprehend the situation. Layla, gone, was the cruelest of all possibilities, and yet, somehow, it felt like the darkness around him was only just beginning to unfold. But just as his mind spiraled into chaos, there was a sound behind him, a subtle click of a door being shut. Rami whipped around, his pulse racing, ready to confront whatever or whoever had been lurking in the shadows of his apartment. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, every inch of him alert. But to his shock, there stood someone he never expected to see. Amir. Amir, the same man Rami had trusted more than anyone. The man who had been by his side through the hardest of times, the one he thought had helped him escape the dangers of his past. The man who, despite everything, had been his friend. Or so Rami had believed. Amir's expression was unreadable, his eyes dark and intense, a slight smirk curling at the corner of his lips. For a long moment, Rami didn't know what to say. His entire world felt like it had just tilted on its axis. Why was Amir here? What was he doing here? Rami, Amir said softly, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. You really don't get it, do you? Rami's head spun, his thoughts desperately trying to catch up. What do you mean? Layla, where is she? What's going on? Amir sighed and took a slow step forward, the calmness in his demeanor unnerving. You're too late, he said, his voice no longer laced with the camaraderie Rami remembered. It was colder now, detached. She's already gone. And the reason you're in all of this, well, that's something you've never been able to grasp, have you? The weight of Amir's words felt like a punch to Rami's gut. The world seemed to tilt even more, a crushing realization creeping in. Everything Rami thought he knew, the threats, the messages, the strange man who had followed him, had it all been leading him to this moment? Had he been played this entire time? Was a mere part of the conspiracy that had slowly pulled Rami into a spiral of paranoia? What are you talking about? What do you mean I'm too late? Rami stammered, struggling to keep his voice steady, his mind desperately clawing for answers that felt just out of reach. What does Layla have to do with this? Amir didn't respond right away. He just stared at Rami with a strange, almost pitying look. Finally, he spoke again, his words cutting deep, like they were meant to shatter the illusion Rami had built around his life. You've been chasing the wrong ghosts, Rami. The truth was right in front of you the whole time. You just didn't want to see it. Rami's mind raced. The words made no sense. Amir couldn't be serious. They had been through too much together for him to be a part of whatever had just unfolded. The betrayal was unthinkable. But as Amir spoke, a cold dread started to settle deep inside Rami's chest. The pieces that had never quite fit into place, the nagging doubts he'd pushed aside, maybe they weren't just coincidences after all. Layla wasn't just taken, Rami, Amir continued, his voice low, almost a whisper now. She chose to disappear. And so did you. You've both been running for far too long. Rami's head spun. Chose to disappear? That wasn't possible. Layla wouldn't have left, not without a trace. She wouldn't have abandoned him like this. But Amir's expression remained unwavering. There was no hint of regret, no remorse, only cold calculation. Why are you doing this? Rami finally managed to choke out. Why are you telling me this now? Amir looked at him, his eyes narrowing as if he were waiting for Rami to catch up. You're still looking for answers, Rami. But the truth is, there's nothing left to find. You've been living in the past for too long. It's over. He paused, a faint smile flickering at his lips. Or maybe, you're not as innocent in all of this as you think. The statement hit Rami like a freight train. His breath caught in his throat, his mind racing, trying to process the shock, the disbelief. Innocent? What did Amir mean by that? What could possibly connect Rami to whatever was unfolding now? Don't you get it? Amir's voice rose slightly. All the threats, all the games you've been playing, Everything was set in motion the moment you stepped foot back into this life. The moment you came to me for help, thinking I was the one who could fix it all. You thought I was on your side. But Rami, I've always been on the other side. The realization struck him like a lightning bolt. Rami stumbled back, his chest tightening as his thoughts finally started to piece together the horrific truth. Amir hadn't just been a friend. He had been orchestrating this all along. From the moment Rami had reached out to him, everything had been a setup, a carefully crafted web to trap him in the past, to force him to confront a history he had tried so desperately to leave behind. But what was the goal? What did Amir gain from all of this? And what had happened to Layla? Rami wanted to shout, to demand answers, but the words wouldn't come. His throat felt tight, like a vice was slowly closing around it. Everything he had thought was true, everything he had fought to protect, was now a lie. And the worst part? The more he thought about it, the more Rami realized that perhaps he had never known Amir at all. The man standing in front of him was a stranger, a hidden enemy disguised as a friend. And as Rami's mind continued to spiral, a chilling thought settled in the pit of his stomach. If Amir had been the one pulling the strings all along, then what had really happened to Layla? And was she still alive? The air in the apartment felt thick, suffocating, as Rami stood there, reeling from Amir's revelation. The room seemed to close in on him, every breath feeling more labored than the last. His world, which had once been so certain, now felt like a crumbling puzzle that he could no longer put together. He had trusted Amir. He had relied on him. And now, as he looked at the man who had been his closest confidant, it became painfully clear that everything he thought he knew about his life was a lie. The betrayal was so deep, so overwhelming, that it threatened to swallow him whole. But there was no time to fall apart. The stakes had just escalated, and if he didn't make a move soon, everything he cared about would slip through his fingers. Amir's smirk remained, but there was something else in his eyes now. Something darker. "You don't get it, do you, Rami?" he said, his voice low and steady. "You've been so focused on playing the hero, but the truth is, you were always part of the game. You've always been a pawn, and now I'm giving you the choice of a lifetime. You can keep fighting, keep digging into things you'll never understand, or you can walk away and leave it all behind. Leave Layla behind." The words hit Rami like a punch to the gut. Layla, his sister, his family. The thought of her being caught up in this twisted mess was too much to bear. But now he was being given an ultimatum. His body went cold as the weight of Amir's words sank in. He could stop, walk away, and spare himself from whatever madness was brewing. Or he could keep pushing, keep searching for the truth, no matter the cost. And there was no guarantee of what would happen next. There never had been. "You're asking me to give up on her?" Rami's voice shook with a mix of fury and disbelief. He didn't want to believe Amir. Didn't want to accept that the man he had considered a brother could be the very one to pull him into this nightmare. But the evidence was undeniable now. The chilling message, the games being played, and Layla's disappearance, it was all connected. And Amir, the one person he trusted above anyone else, had known more than he had let on. Amir's expression hardened. "You don't have a choice anymore. You're too deep in it. You think you can save her, but you're just digging your own grave." He stepped closer, his voice dropping even lower, almost a whisper now. "You want to know what's really happening? You want to know who's behind all of this? Fine. But the truth? It'll destroy you. It'll break you." Rami's heart pounded in his chest, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and anger. He didn't know how much longer he could keep his composure. The walls were closing in, and the pressure of this impossible choice was overwhelming. He had already lost so much, his parents, his peace, his sense of safety. Now Layla was somewhere out there, and the thought of her suffering because of him, because he hadn't seen the truth sooner, was too much to bear. "Why are you doing this?" Rami's voice cracked, the weight of the question almost too much to say aloud. "What do you want from me, Amir? What's your endgame?" Amir paused, his eyes flicking toward the door for a split second, as if weighing something. "You're still trying to understand, but you're too close to the fire now. If you want to know everything, you're going to have to make a choice. You can keep digging into Layla's disappearance, and I'll give you all the answers. But it'll cost you. Or you can walk away, take your safety, and forget about her. It's up to you." Rami's stomach turned as Amir's words echoed in his mind. It'll cost you. The threat in those words was clear, but Rami wasn't ready to walk away. He couldn't. Layla was his responsibility. She always had been. But the thought of what Amir was offering, the truth, the answers, the closure, was something Rami had been craving, even if it meant facing something darker than he could ever have imagined. He had always lived in the shadows of his past, never truly understanding what had happened or why. But now, with Amir standing there, offering him a path to the truth, Rami had to make a choice. The weight of it crushed him. "I can't just turn away," Rami finally said, his voice low but firm. "I can't let her go without knowing the truth." Amir's eyes flickered with a mix of disappointment and something more sinister. "You'll regret this, Rami. But I can't say I didn't warn you." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Rami felt the weight of his decision settle deep into his bones. He had no idea what was coming next, but he knew that whatever it would change everything. The truth, whatever it was, had been hidden from him for far too long. And now it was going to be unveiled, whether he was ready for it or not. As Amir turned to leave, he paused at the door, looking over his shoulder with a strange glint in his eye. "One more thing," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "You're not the only one who's been watching. You should be careful who you trust from here on out. There's more at stake than just your life." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Rami alone in the silence. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing, torn between the fear of what was to come and the desperate need for answers. The truth was within reach, but at what cost? Could he really trust Amir, or had he just walked straight into a trap? And where was Layla in all of this? Was she even alive? The questions kept piling up, each one more dangerous than the last, and Rami realized that in seeking the truth, he might lose more than he could ever get back. His phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. He hesitated, knowing that whatever was coming next might be the final piece of the puzzle, but also dreading the consequences of finding it. The message was short, but its impact was enough to freeze him in place. "The clock is ticking, Rami. Time's running out for everyone." Rami's blood ran cold as the weight of the words sank in. He was running out of time. And the truth? It was a luxury he might not get to have. Rami's pulse thudded in his ears as the weight of Amir's words continued to echo in his mind. His body felt numb, almost detached from the reality around him. He was used to facing danger, used to living on the edge, but this was different. This wasn't just about him. It wasn't just about Layla. It was bigger, much bigger. As Rami stood there, staring at the door Amir had just walked through, it became painfully clear that he had been a small piece in a much larger puzzle. And the pieces were rapidly falling into place, threatening to crush everything in their path. The message on his phone, the cryptic warning from Amir, the strange phone calls, the shadowy figure who had followed him, it was all connected. Rami had been too blind to see it before, too consumed by the need to protect Layla, but now he understood. This wasn't just about one woman disappearing. This was about a network, an operation so vast and deeply embedded that even the people closest to him were caught in its web. People he thought he could trust, people like Amir, people like Layla, were just pawns in a game much larger than he could ever have imagined. And the realization was crushing. His mind raced, and the silence in the room felt suffocating. He needed answers. He needed to know who was pulling the strings, who was behind this twisted game. And the only way to find out was to dig deeper, to confront the very people who had been part of this conspiracy from the start. But who could he trust now? Amir? No. Amir had already shown his true colors. Layla? Was she involved? Or had she become another casualty of the plan? Rami's gut twisted at the thought. He had always thought he was protecting her, but now, more than ever, it felt like she was just another piece to be moved around in this ruthless game. Rami had to act quickly. The clock was ticking, and every second that passed felt like it brought him closer to something much worse than he had anticipated. He grabbed his jacket, the cold leather sending a chill down his spine as he stepped out into the night. The city seemed darker than usual, the shadows deeper, as if the world itself was conspiring against him. He had to make one final move, but where would it lead? His phone buzzed again, this time with an unknown number. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he answered. Rami. A voice on the other end said, its tone sharp and unmistakable. You've made a mistake. You've gone too far. It was a voice he recognized but hadn't heard in years.
Nia.
Layla's best friend. The one person who had always been there for them both. Always had their back. Or so Rami thought. Where is she? Rami demanded, his voice breaking. Tell me where Layla is, Nia. Nia's laugh on the other end was hollow, without warmth. You still don't get it, do you? Layla's not the victim here. She's never been the victim. You've been looking in all the wrong places, Rami. You've been chasing shadows while the real danger is standing right in front of you. Rami's breath caught. His mind scrambled for clarity. What the hell are you talking about? You think Amir is the only one who's been playing you? Nia's words were laced with venom. You think the two of us were just trying to protect you? No, Rami, we've been trying to protect ourselves. You're not the hero of this story. You're just another pawn, and you've been walking right into their trap. The chill in Rami's bones deepened. He had trusted Nia, just like he had trusted Amir. But now, with every word she spoke, the walls he had built around his trust and loyalty began to crumble. He felt like a fool, a pawn, a piece of this game he didn't even understand. You're lying, he spat, desperation creeping into his voice. You're working with Amir, aren't you? You're both. Stop, Rami, Nia interrupted, her voice lowering. Listen to me carefully. You need to stop this now. You have no idea how deep this goes. They've been watching you for months. And if you don't back off, if you don't let it go, you're going to lose everything. You'll be lucky if you make it out of this alive. The line went dead. Rami stood frozen in the middle of the street, his mind whirling. They've been watching you for months. The words hit him like a freight train, and for the first time, he realized just how dangerous this situation had become. This wasn't just about Layla, or even about Amir and Nia. This was about something much bigger, something that reached into the very core of his life, pulling strings he couldn't see, manipulating everything he thought he knew. He needed to get to the bottom of this, but now he understood the stakes in a way he never had before. If Nia's warning was true, if this wasn't just a random conspiracy, then whoever was behind it had power, real power. And that power could destroy him. He couldn't afford to ignore it, not anymore. But every move he made seemed to push him further into the darkness, into the web of lies and betrayals that was threatening to tear his world apart. Rami took a deep breath and made his decision. He couldn't back down.
Not now.
Not when Layla's life, and maybe even his own, was hanging by a thread. But he knew now that there was no way out without facing the full scope of the danger. He was no longer just a man looking for answers. He was now a target. And whatever this conspiracy was, it was about to show him just how far it would go to protect its secrets. Every step Rami took felt like it was pushing him closer to a precipice, and the closer he got to the truth, the more uncertain he became of what would be waiting for him on the other side. The danger was no longer a whisper in the shadows. It was real, it was present, and it was closing in. Rami had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. There was no turning back now. Rami's hands shook as he pushed open the creaking door, the weight of the moment heavy in his chest. The air was thick with tension, and his heart raced like a drumbeat in his ears. Every instinct he had told him that something was about to break wide open, that the answers he had spent so long chasing were just within his reach. But in the pit of his stomach, a gnawing feeling reminded him that every answer might only lead to more questions, more betrayals, and deeper lies. There was no turning back now. The world outside had fallen silent, as if even the streets held their breath for what was coming. He stepped into the dimly lit room, the walls closing in around him. His eyes locked on the figure standing at the far end, a silhouette against the low light. It was Amir. But something about the way he stood there, arms crossed, his expression unreadable, felt wrong. This wasn't the Amir Rami had trusted. The man before him was cold, calculating, a mere reflection of the person he thought he had known. "You came." Amir's voice broke the silence, low and almost mocking, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. Rami's jaw clenched as he stepped closer. "Where is she, Amir? Where is Layla? You know damn well what you've been involved in. You've been lying to me this entire time. And now, it's time for you to tell me the truth." Amir didn't flinch. His eyes held something darker, something Rami couldn't read, but it made his blood run cold. "You're so quick to point fingers, Rami. But you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. This isn't something you can just walk away from. You think this is about Layla? You think you're the one who matters here?" A chill ran down Rami's spine. "What the hell are you talking about?" His voice cracked, desperation seeping in. "I'm not leaving until I know where she is, and I'm not backing down, Amir." For a brief moment, Amir's gaze softened, almost like he was contemplating something, but then it disappeared, replaced by a familiar coldness. "You've already lost, Rami. This was never about Layla. She's just a part of it, just like you. We're all just pieces in a game much bigger than any of us. It's too late to turn back now." Rami's chest tightened. His mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, each one more troubling than the last. What was Amir saying? Had he been a part of something this entire time? Was he the one pulling the strings, orchestrating everything from the beginning? Before Rami could speak again, a soft noise came from the corner of the room, and he spun around, his breath caught in his throat. The figure that stepped out of the shadows was one he had never expected to see. It was Nia. Rami's heart dropped. "You," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You've been involved in this too?" Nia's lips curled into a small, almost sad smile. "You really are clueless, aren't you, Rami? You thought you were so special. You thought you were the hero of this story. But you were just another pawn, just like Amir said. You never saw the bigger picture." Rami staggered back, his mind struggling to process what was happening. You were working with him this whole time? With Amir?" Nia stepped forward, her expression more serious now. "No, Rami. I wasn't just working with Amir. I was working with them. The ones who've been controlling everything. The ones who've been watching you, controlling the narrative from behind the scenes. You think it was all random? The threats? The messages? The constant push and pull? No. It was orchestrated. Every move you made, every choice you thought was yours, it was part of a plan. A plan to get you here." Rami's head spun as the weight of her words crushed down on him. He thought he had been in control. He thought he had been making choices, protecting Layla, protecting himself. But it had all been a lie, a game he didn't even know he was part of. "You were supposed to be the sacrifice, Rami," Nia continued, her voice steady, as though she were speaking about something trivial. "You were always meant to be the one who would go down for this. Layla was just a means to an end. But now, it's too late. You've gotten too close." The ground beneath Rami's feet seemed to crumble away as the realization hit him like a freight train. Layla hadn't been a victim. She had been part of this from the beginning. She had been playing her own game, just like everyone else. She wasn't just caught in the middle, she was the reason it all began. "You," Rami's voice caught, the truth setting in like a bitter poison. "You were using me to get to her, to get to the truth." Nia nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "We used you, Rami. We needed you to do the heavy lifting, to uncover the evidence we couldn't get to. But now, you've become a liability. You've outlived your usefulness." Amir stepped forward, his hands now unclasped, revealing a glint of something in his grip. Rami's breath quickened, but he didn't have time to react before the truth exploded in his face. The final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place, and it hit harder than anything he could have imagined. "You were never supposed to find out," Amir said softly, the words carrying a finality that made Rami's blood run cold. "But now that you have, there's only one thing left to do." Without warning, Amir lunged forward, but Rami was ready. The confrontation, the battle of wits and survival, exploded in an instant. They were in it now, and there was no turning back. And then, just as quickly as it began, something unexpected happened. The door slammed open, and a figure stepped inside, Layla. She wasn't alone. She was with someone. Someone Rami never expected. The last person he thought he could trust. A twist he never saw coming. Layla wasn't a victim in this game. She was its architect. Rami's world shattered. Everything he thought he knew was a lie. Rami stood there, frozen, as Layla walked into the room, her presence both haunting and familiar. The shock of seeing her, the betrayal etched in her face, left him breathless. For a moment, everything seemed to stop, the tension, the fear, the anger all suspended in time. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the weight of it all was too much. The room was heavy, suffocating, and the faces around him blurred into an indistinct, chaotic mess. Layla wasn't the person he had thought she was. She wasn't the woman he had once trusted, the one who had shared whispered dreams and quiet hopes. She was someone else entirely, and the realization hit him like a tidal wave, pulling him under. He had been a fool to think he could ever truly understand anyone in this twisted game. Layla's eyes met his, and there was no warmth in them. No love, no regret. Only the coldness of someone who had long ago accepted the cost of their choices. She glanced briefly at Amir, who stood in the background, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. Then, she turned back to Rami, her voice smooth but devoid of any emotion. "You were always going to find out, Rami. It's just the way these things work. You've seen the pieces now, you know how this game is played. But you'll never understand the full picture, and neither will anyone else. Some things aren't meant to be known." The words stung more than Rami was prepared for, but beneath the sting, a part of him knew the truth. He had been naive, caught up in his own need for answers, for closure, not realizing that closure was a luxury no one in this game could afford. Everything he had done, every choice he had made, every step he had taken to uncover the truth had only brought him deeper into a labyrinth with no way out. The realization crushed him in ways he couldn't even begin to articulate. "You've been working with them, haven't you?" Rami's voice was low, raw with the weight of betrayal. "All this time, you were never on my side." Layla didn't flinch, her expression unreadable. "You were never meant to be a part of this, Rami. You weren't supposed to know. You got too close, and now," she trailed off, her gaze hardening. "It's over." A silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Rami's mind raced, but he couldn't find the words. The finality in Layla's tone left him with a hollow ache, a feeling of irreversible loss that seeped into his bones. He had lost not just the woman he loved, but everything he had believed in. The foundation of his entire world had crumbled beneath him, leaving only the ruins of shattered trust and broken promises. But as the silence grew unbearable, Layla took a step forward, her eyes softening for the first time. "There's nothing more for you here, Rami. You have to walk away. Go home. Move on with your life." Her voice wavered slightly, but her resolve was clear. This wasn't your battle." Rami's chest tightened as the weight of her words sank in. There was no justice to be had here. No retribution. No final confrontation where everything made sense, where the villain was exposed and the hero emerged victorious. The truth, the real truth, wasn't something that could be neatly tied up with a bow. It was messy, complicated, and it had cost him more than he had ever imagined. In that moment, he realized that some things were beyond his control, beyond his understanding. "Is that all it is?" Rami's voice was barely a whisper, thick with disbelief. "You just walk away?" Layla's eyes glinted with something unreadable. "It's not about walking away, Rami. It's about knowing when to stop fighting." She turned her back to him, signaling the end of the conversation, the end of everything they had once shared. Rami stood there, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, as she walked out of the room without another word. He didn't chase her. He didn't try to stop her. Because deep down, he knew that chasing answers, chasing closure, would never bring back the life he thought he had. It was gone. And now, all he had left was the bitter taste of reality, a reality he hadn't been prepared for. As the door clicked shut behind Layla, Rami remained in the darkened room, staring at nothing in particular, the silence a deafening reminder of everything he had lost. The game was over, but the scars it had left, the questions that remained unanswered, those would linger far longer than anything he could escape. And then, just as he thought it was finally over, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Rami hesitated before pulling it out. The screen lit up with a message, simple and to the point. "It's not over yet. Watch your back." The message was from an unknown number. The name attached to it sent a jolt of recognition through him. It was a name he never expected to see again. A name he had thought was long buried in the past. Rami's blood ran cold. He wasn't done. He had never been more certain of anything in his life. The game wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And with that final twist, Rami understood one thing. There was always more beneath the surface, always more to uncover. There were still secrets waiting to be revealed, and this was far from the end. It was only the beginning of something much bigger. And with a grim sense of resolve, Rami stepped forward into the darkness, knowing full well that the only way to truly escape this web of lies was to keep moving forward, even if it meant risking everything. As the screen faded to black, the silence was deafening. The story was over, or was it?